Please welcome Matt Ketschke, Senior Vice President of Customer Energy Solutions for Edison, and Jeff Knueppel, General Manager of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, for a conversation on cities are switching to electric buses. Why now?
Good afternoon, everyone. So, welcome to our fireside chat on cities are switching to electric buses. Why now?
Where's the fire?
Where's the fire? No fire. So I'm Matt Ketschke. I'm Senior Vice President of Customer Energy Solutions for Con Ed. Joining me here today is Jeff Knueppel. Jeff is the General Manager of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority, or SEPTA, and runs one of the largest electric bus fleets today in the nation. Before we start with Jeff, I want to give you a quick overview of the electric bus fleet today in the U.S. Today, there are over 65,000 transit buses in the U.S., and the U.S. DOT estimated that one zero-emissions bus can eliminate as much CO2 as 27 passenger vehicles over the 12-year lifespan of the bus. So buses are an important part of the decarbonization strategy when you think about decarbonization of transportation. The electric transit buses are a fast-growing vehicle segment, and by 2030, some forecasts show that it will make up approximately 50% of the total transit fleet in the U.S. A recent EPA report identified 168 different programs across 46 different states. And many transit operators have aggressive goals for zero emissions in their fleet. The city of Chicago is looking to have fully electric fleet by 2040. The state of California has passed legislation requiring transit agencies to have 100% zero emission fleet by 2040, and the county of Los Angeles is looking to go zero emission by 2030. And where I live in New York, we have 10 buses with 15 more on order, with an RFP planned this year for 45 more. And their recently released 5-year capital plan is looking to add 500 new buses with a capital spend for electrification of $1.15 billion. They have a goal of electrifying 100% of the 5,700 transit buses by 2040. So the mandates locally are driven by a combination of local air quality concerns and concerns about carbon emissions. But how we think about operating and integrating this new technology into the very complicated transit fleet of these transit organizations potentially provides a number of challenges. So today's conversation really is going to be how do transit operators think about doing this? So Jeff, for SEPTA, what are you thinking about?
Well, when we our first transition was from diesel to hybrid, and that was about a 4 to 5 year period where I think it was about 32 hybrid buses. We put in a small procurement, and we wanted to kind of test them out, learn from them, and be able to make sure that we were ready when we started going for procurements that were providing 100 buses a year, that we were ready. And so it's really the same process all over, except, you know, when we did the conversion to hybrid buses, I think that scalability was easier. Right now, there's more issues on scalability from doing the small pilots that we have at SEPTA. We have a 25 battery electric bus pilot program that we did under low-no grant funding, which was great, and covered the differential in costs between the diesel hybrid and, you know, the battery electric bus. But right now, it's really about us gaining experience, figuring it out, making sure that we're ready to go before we do these big procurements. We have a couple years to kind of get ourselves on a good footing with these battery electric buses, learn a lot of things. It touches a lot of our organization, from our operators to our engineering to just how we even, you know, schedule and do busing operations. Currently, some of our routes aren't even as you know, the way they're configured or not as laid out or conducive to electric operation yet. So there's a lot that we're doing right now, and it's all towards, you know, kind of making sure that we do this right. For SEPTA, we have a $4.5 billion backlog of state-of-good repair needs, and so we can't afford to get this wrong. These are big procurements. If, you know, those battery electric buses, somewhere $900,000 to $1 million at a you know, a pop. If we do a 500 bus order and we get it wrong and they don't last long enough, that's a big problem for us. So really, you know, we're excited about battery electric buses, but we've got to do our, due diligence and make sure that they're really going to work for us and that they're ready. And even that the industry is ready to produce a bus that we're comfortable using.
So on the 25, you operate 25 today on a fleet of 1,400, right?
Yeah, and we have 10 more coming,
10 more coming
from New Flyer.
So what are some of the early challenges you're seeing in operating that first few?
Well, the weight. We've had some difficulties getting charging away from our depots. So we've opted to go with more batteries, and that creates a very heavy bus. That's been a bit of an issue on the first procurement that we've done for battery electric buses. We've done pretty well through the summer. We never went lower on the routes that we chose to start with than 50% state of charge. So, one season, that's good. We've got to get through the winter season and make sure that, that's probably a little bit more difficult. But, we're getting up to 10 hours of service, and like I said, I don't think we ever went below a 50% state of charge. So, there's that. There's a couple design issues that you get when you go with a new style of bus. A couple things that our operators are getting adjusted to. It's a very quiet bus, and some people think that it's doesn't accelerate. Well, it accelerates more. It's got better acceleration capabilities than another bus. So you've got to adjust, and there's a learning curve for our operators, for our maintenance people. But I think the actual propulsion systems and all that's actually going pretty well. It's more about just making sure that it's a good bus right now, and really the issue of weight.
So as you look forward, what do you think some potential issues with scale-up would be for SEPTA? How are you looking at the scaling?
Well, as I mentioned, I think it's a very different scaling from going to diesel hybrid and now going from hybrid to battery electric buses. The big issue is how do you charge these buses? And it's not just how, but can you provide the amount of electricity? I'm amazed that, when I sat down and we started talking about, how much it would take to charge, my entire fleet, my breath was taken away. I did not think that. I didn't, for whatever, and I'm not an electrical engineer, I'm a structural engineer, but, I know enough. I've been in infrastructure for a long time, and, it's 140 megawatts to power our whole fleet. So that's 1,400 buses. That's a lot of infrastructure. That's something that, that issue is really the big one. How are we going to pay for that kind of infrastructure? We've been able to do it, on that small, pilot project that we did with the 25, and we're grappling with how to charge up the 10 that we have coming for another depot that we have. But that's really a big issue is how are we going to do it? And I think that also, as we're trying to make emissions less and less, I think it's important to not just think about, providing enough power, but doing the best job, to make that power cleaner.
Yep.
So I think that all of that has to get looked at going forward. And so that's really, I think that's the big issue. And then I did mention, there's a couple of our routes that are probably not as conducive to the way the battery electric buses are right now. Most of them are, but maybe some of our longer, higher speed, different, those, we don't have enough experience yet to know that we could do it across the entire fleet. There's different things, that I've gotten a lot of them in my 31-year career at SEPTA. Those great calls in the middle of the night that say there's no power at Southern Garage, 200 buses can't charge, and you're what are we going to do? And so, I think even the redundancy issue, when we have had, hurricanes and power issues in our region, it's the bus fleet that came out when the electrical grid was down. Now, if you've got to think that through. How do you make sure that you're your bus fleet really is the last way of getting people around when things really get tough from weather or whatever happens. And so we have to make sure that that fleet will always be available. And that's a big issue too. And then that can drive your infrastructure costs a lot higher. So if you're trying to really, really work towards a lot of redundancy.
Yep. So from both the infrastructure for charging, the redundancy, sounds like a lot of this is working with your electric company. In your case, it's Pico, right? The majority of your area. So how are you working with Pico about thinking through some of these problems?
Well, we've been meeting and discussing. My director of innovation, he's over here. He's with me. They've been meeting with Pico and talking about it. And each location's a little bit different. Each one of our depots or garages is a little bit different, and there's significant costs. And I know that Pico's been very helpful, very interested in working with us on this. So that's we have a very good relationship with them. They've been working on a bill to be able to put a plan together to deal with not just charging of battery electric buses, but a lot of electric vehicles in our state. I know that that's a bill that they're pushing, and as a utility, they need that to have the flexibility to then work with us in a way that's scalable, not just these small bus pilot projects that we do, but across the entire network.
So that partnership between the transit agency, the utility, to put together a plan to then go to regulators and lawmakers and policymakers, say, to achieve these policy objectives of decarbonization through electrification of transit, there's going to be some infrastructure spend we have to do.
Yeah.
And it's not clear that that's in your budget the way they exist today, and not necessarily in Pico's.
And it's definitely, as I mentioned, my actual backlog of state of good repair needs is $4.6 billion.
Okay.
I have, on the railroad, I have 231 multiple unit electric cars on my railroad. They're the oldest in the country. They were brought here from 74 to 77. So I have significant capital needs. And so it's tough. That's why, the low-no grant was great for us in terms of taking away the differential between the hybrid and the battery electric bus. But it's really, like I said, we have to be so careful with the resources that we have to keep the system operating. So we're excited about battery electric buses, but it has to be right. The timing has to be right, and the product has to be right for us to make that big jump. And we're hopeful, but we have to get there. And
so it sounds like most transit agencies, you got a lot of demands on both your capital and your operating maintenance spend each period. This competes for a piece of that. How do you think about the both capital costs and the ongoing operation and maintenance of electrics versus diesels?
Our sustainability program, what's interesting about it, and I think we have a very, very strong energy component to our sustainability program, is that it typically, almost always, the projects pay for themselves. So whether we're doing, it's been great for us. We've been doing projects, solar projects, where the savings pay for themselves. We just announced a really big solar project where it will be built out in Franklin County, and that's great, and it's going to lower our energy costs. So we're looking to do these innovative projects in a way where there's cost savings, and then that helps us not have to literally take it out of our capital budget, but let those savings pay off the expense. And I think we're hopeful that there's going to be a reduction in maintenance costs. Not a lot of moving parts on a battery electric bus. It's unbelievable. I see different statistics all the time, how many thousand moving parts there are in a internal combustion engine versus an electric vehicle. It's way a reduction. So I think that there's opportunities to have a really good drop in your maintenance budget. It remains to be seen on the structures. They're not the same on our battery electric buses. We've gone with some, to reduce weight, they've gone with some composite structural systems. We need to make sure that they're going to last 15, 16 years, that we're comfortable that they're going to go well. So I think there's opportunities on the maintenance side to have our operating budgets reduced, but then you have to make sure that you implement in a way that it doesn't create more costs for your operations. And I've seen new software coming out on how to set up your operations so that you can optimize your charging with your operational plan. So that's all important on the operating side. And then on the capital side, as I mentioned, it's been great that the federal government has done some of these low-no grants. We've won 2 of them, but that huge capital expense, that's difficult, for us to bear. We have to, we'll have to see how that all works out, because it's a significant cost.
Yeah. Am I right that a typical electric vehicle today, electric bus, is about twice the capital cost of a comparable diesel or hybrid?
Well, what we're seeing, the incremental cost is about $150,000, $200,000 from hybrid to battery electric bus. That's what we've been experiencing.
All right, but that's a pretty significant difference, right?
Yeah, well, it adds up when you have 1,400 buses.
Yep.
So, our last big bus procurement was 525 buses. So, as we move to the future and we need to start making some big procurements again, that's where, we have to get all these questions about battery electric buses answered. And even, the ability of the industry to, I think it was obviously probably easier for the industry to go from diesel bus to diesel hybrid as it is to go from, hybrid now to battery electric. So, even the production capability, I think, has to get there and has to be able to, consistently and on time provide the buses that you need. So there's a lot of, things to work out.
Yep.
So, I met with a supplier a couple years ago, and I told them then that, I'd be looking for an opportunity, because I really thought that it was a very, very good opportunity for not just SEPTA, for our industry. And so, they were really happy that a couple years later, when we won that low-no grant, that we called them up and said, hey, let's work this out. But it's still early on, and there's a lot of homework to do.
Yep. So one of the other big operating costs is fuel, right? So replacing diesel with electric probably brings us to the conversation we have a lot on what's the rate structure, what are potential demand charges and how those work for you, how you think about smoothing those out to make fueling cost effective.
Well, and I think going from diesel to the diesel hybrid bus, we probably saved $3 million in gas, 3 million gallons a year. So we've already, again, it's great when we get operational efficiencies that lower our operating budget. So spending less on fuel has really been great for us. It's the same situation with moving to battery electric buses. We're going to have to work with the utility to really come up with something that makes sense for us. And I think they're willing to talk that through. I mean, we've had a very good situation so far with Pico. But there's all kinds of opportunities, even to the point of some of our old infrastructure that we have additional capacity at it. Can we figure out how, we used to have a much bigger streetcar network. That's been kind of scaled back. Is there ability to take some of that, put that power back and use it to charge systems? How do we really come up with a very efficient system? Is it are we going to get a good rate? Are we going to be able to get some efficiencies? Because it is a tremendous increase in power. 140 megawatts, if we build out our whole system, is something that I think we really need to make it work out for SEPTA, and I think people understand that. It may not be the same kind of rate structure we have at all.
Yeah, so looking differently at how we think about rates, how we think about utilization of that energy delivery infrastructure to maximize the value. So as you look forward, what is your biggest concern as we move forward? There's a lot of policy push behind trying to go all electric transportation. People want to move quickly, but you're still responsible to make sure those trains, those buses run on time, people get from where they are to where they need to be.
Yeah, I think the reason that I volunteered to do this is because what I wanted to say, and I think Jeff Hyatt said it, I normally say what's on my mind, is we have to just make sure that we walk before we run. That's all, that's really all I'm saying. You know, we're excited about battery electric buses, but especially with transit agencies with tight capital budgets, you know, we have to be very, very careful that it's ready for us to make these big procurements. And, you know, for SEPTA, like I said, it was a 4 or 5 year process for moving from diesel to diesel hybrid. It's, you know, we're going to have to see what that time frame is now. We're doing our homework. We're working very closely with the vendors. We're looking at all the data. You know, it's exciting to have them out on our routes. You know, people love riding them. You know, our elected officials, we use them whenever they come into town, and they're very happy that they're out there. And it is an exciting time. We just have to make sure that the industry is ready, that we work with the utilities closely, that we make sure that this is going to be good. Because I can't buy a fleet and it lasts 5 or 6 years. You know, that's just not going to be. I can't have it where it increased my operational costs because it's, you know, the charging situation is either tough from a cost perspective or from how it affects my run guides and the way my operators, where our runs are structured. So there's a, you know, a time period here where we just have to make sure we get it right. That's really why I'm here. And like I said, my decision to go with battery electric buses at SEPTA twice now, and I had to, you know, get it, you know, support from our board, and certainly you know, it's unbelievable, you know, reduction in emissions, but we just have to make sure that we get it right. So that's why I volunteered. So it's a very good question.
So sounds like a lot of opportunity, but a lot of questions still to be answered, and should be an interesting 4, 5, 6 years to work through this process.
The industry has to be mature, and this issue of scalability in terms of providing the charging network is really important. So, you know, I think we all can get there. We just have to walk before we run. That's my guidance here.
Well, Jeff, thanks very much. Learned a bunch today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.